It's Thursday night, so I'm here at Alchemist Attic, which I forgot to tag. I'll tag that later in the video. Preparing to do tarot readings, and excuse me. So tonight's card, I think I posted on, I think is Strength, which is one of those kind of complex cards in a way, and hard to. I was talking this out with somebody the other day, and it's sort of it's a hard card to sometimes explain. So I'm going to go through the questions again in my Tarot Readers Resource Workbook to kind of take a deep dive into the meaning of the card as I see it. And again, I don't have my sketchbook here to show you what I drew Strength as, but it's a lot like the traditional depiction. I drew it as a lion with the woman is dressed as sort of a conservation agent, sort of, or a zookeeper, or something, you know, some sort of scientific role of working with the animals, as because that does kind of imply this, you know, needing to, that she's not making it a pet, she's not trying to control the wild animal that it is, but to keep it confined, and to be able to work with it means developing that sort of working relationship with something that's essentially very wild and making it willingly comply to a certain extent. So there's a lot in the Strength card about kind of taming the wild and acknowledging the wildness in ourselves, in others, in situations, in the world, whatever, but those wild type forces can't be tamed by force. Not very successfully. And we have because it's not, of course, the image of somebody, you know, taming a lion with a whip and a chair, like in a circus. It's not by force. It's not making the lion something that it isn't. She's very gently and persistently closing its mouth, and it complies because it wants to. So we'll dive deeper into that. So, I have sort of a wide-ranging series of answers to the questions because it is kind of a complex card that can mean a lot of things. The fictional character, well, the three keywords that I would summarize the meaning of this card as is patience, persistence, and compromise. But it's in a different sense because those words, like compromise, could also be kind of used with the Chariot, and there's a lot of other cards. So it's in a very specific way. But I would call it the Alliance card because it's not, cause, you know, like in this depiction, they're working together, even though it's representing two very different types of forces. They're working together willingly, and cooperating with each other willingly, and without one sort of becoming subservient to the other. So the fictional character that it would remind me of, and I haven't watched this film in a really, really long time, but when I was in college, I was a French minor, and we watched Nikita, which I know has had an American version and the TV show and all that. But in the French version, I remember the whole series of scenes where they're training her. If you're not familiar with the story, she's a sort of teenage criminal that ends up killing a cop, kind of on act. She's having withdrawals and stuff, and they sentence her to life in prison, but then they fake her death and offer her a way out as a sort of government agent, that she's going to, you know, kind of become a hitman for the government, but they're going to train her to sort of be that, and it's either that or go ahead and let them execute her. But then there's this whole, which that's not the meaning of the card, but there's a whole series of scenes of them kind of taking this very wild, you know, teenager who's lived on the streets and is an anarchist and all this, like, kind of taming her, but it's a very kind of gentle, persistent thing. Like she resists, and they let her resist until she kind of gives in, and that's a sort of malicious treatment of the idea, but that's in there too. It's that she's doing something that she wouldn't naturally want to do. It's not in her nature. It's not who she is originally, but she agrees and chooses willingly to be that to get something that she wants, that there's that mutually beneficial thing. But she doesn't really change. They just sort of funnel all of, they put it in a prettier package and they funnel all of those things, all that attitude into something else. The memory from my life that this brings to mind, and there's a couple of things that are a little more maybe less malicious examples. One is, various, especially now working with activist groups and things, and in sort of the pagan community and stuff, there are different groups who have different agendas, have different makeups and goals and the way they work, and there are times when those groups can come together, and not as a not to form something permanent, but to come together and go, this is what we have that you kind of need us to do for you, and you have something that you can do for us, and we can work together, even though it's like normally maybe those groups wouldn't mesh very well together, but to come together towards sort of a common goal willingly, and to not then try to change what those other groups do, to not go, okay, we'll work with you, but you have to do this for us. And it's kind of this is what you do well, and we need that right now, so we're, because we need that and because you need us, and we're going to kind of coexist. There's that sort of yin and yang working together thing. But also on a very personal level, because I think that a lot of these, a lot of readings, a lot of cards speak more about ourselves than they do about other people. But figuring out, like, I have this desire to systematize everything. I was, if I had a catchphrase, it would be, I have a system for that. Yeah, it can actually. That there's the sort of the self that I am, and there's the self that I want to be, and I kind of want to be very where things are in a system, and kind of like you, Brenda. I sort of have this ideal of having a routine and everything. There's a place for everything, and I have a, these are the things that I do on this day, and every day I do this thing, and sort of a very systematized life. But that's not how I am naturally, and learning to that there's the main message of this card is that you can't you can't force those things to be true. Like, you can't just go, like, I can't force myself to adhere to a schedule or a routine that isn't something sort of natural to me. I can learn slowly to do that. I can sort of, but you can get there, but just wanting it and trying to force that doesn't work. Another movie that I think is kind of the best illustration that I could come up with was actually The Breakfast Club. And I hate to use sort of romantic-ish scenarios for some of these, but there's that sort of Claire Bender thing where in the end they come together, they're representation of kind of opposite things, and in the end they come together without expecting the other one to change. Theoretically, I think that relationship would never have worked out in the long run. But yeah, Breaking Habits would be a good example of trying to sort of tame the wild by force, and that's you have to get, like, I quit smoking a while back, and I had tried to do it, kind of force myself to do it a lot of times, and it hadn't worked, and it eventually I had to get to a point, kind of on accident, where I just wanted to, and everything, like, I did it in a way that meshed with my nature, and then it worked. So yeah, that's a good example. As a one-card reading, I think it's a message to, not push, especially when you're working with others, to not push your own agenda by force, or even like coercion, or there's that you have to sometimes work on cooperative and trust relationships to get those changes, or to get that cooperation to happen, that you can't force everybody to do what you want or to change in the ways that you want them to change. That there's a way to get those things to happen, but force isn't it. That other people's natures don't respond to that. And it's true with yourself too, that trying to change can't happen by force. You have to get to know and build a connection between that sort of self that you want to be and the self that you are. That nature of yourself is that sort of wild part that isn't going to respond to force. Reversed, I actually, the three words I would use is force, coercion, and bondage, and not in the way that it's sometimes used, but in the idea that you are tying something else down. And there's a, what is the quote from? Courtney, you'll have to help me out here. You can't put a leash on a tiger. And it's almost the sort of abusive control card. It's when it's reversed, I see it as an indication that somebody is trying to use force to change or to control someone, something, instead of working with the natural forces of I'm not Leo, and I admittedly, since I'm not an astrologer and not very good at, I don't know all that stuff yet, haven't really studied it. I don't know that, in some ways I think with Leo there's that idea that, Leo is a force, a wild force in and of itself. I'm thinking of a specific Leo. Yeah, I know. But you're the one asking the questions. You're asking astrology questions to a tarot reader. So, yeah, if this is supposed to represent Leo, I don't know. Maybe maybe this is the secret to dealing with Leos. Maybe this is the secret to working with a Leo. Is sort of that patient, persistent kind of make them understand, not make them. And I used that phrase when I was talking to somebody about the strength card. And I'm like, not make, but I don't want to say seduce either, but there's that kind of that if you persist, and the explanation that I've always had for this card, that I've read for this card, that I like, is that the lion, there is something about the woman that the lion wants to be tame for her. And it's not that she's coerced him into do it. She's not, forcing him, and it's not some sort of trick. It's that they've developed a relationship that causes the lion to want to be tame for her, and that's, I think, the key in that. But with the reversed card, that does not happen, and it's somebody just trying to slam the lion's jaws shut by force, without, instead of doing the patience thing and relationship developing thing. So I think about I think it's Hammond in Jurassic Park that builds the park and wants to control all the dinosaurs, and it doesn't work. Memory from life, and I think back to when I was in high school and I had friends whose parents were very Pentecostal religious, and the kind that had all sorts of rules for them as teenagers, that trying to control what they did, and kind of trying to change their nature and trying to keep them from being the teenagers that teenagers will be, and how none of that ever worked out, and there were always ways around, and they always rebelled, and almost always, I can think of one that didn't. Yeah, yeah, kind of like that. But this is a cooperative thing. This is making somebody want to do what you want them to do, and vice versa. I mean, I think there's something about the lion that the woman wants to kind of not seize that wild thing, but there's a reason she's interacting with the lion as well, and it's not just to prove that she's superior. It's a working together thing. A book or movie, and I actually thought about Practical Magic as a good example of this too, where she's trying to make her magic into something that's contained and benign and almost mundane. Sort of taming it and making it acceptable, and in the end realizing that she can't do that, that it's not, she can't just force it to be what it isn't. So I think reverse the message of the strength card is definitely to recognize the need for people and things to be what they are and who they are, and to not to learn to adapt to those things rather than control those things. That what we want is not always going to be what's beneficial for everybody else, and that there's often a way for everybody to get what they need out of a relationship, but you have to develop the relationship first. It's kind of like marketing. That's a really good kind of example of this. You can't just go to people and go, you want to buy this thing. You have to develop a relationship with the customer in some sort of way that makes them want what you have, even if they didn't know they wanted it before. And there's, the way that happens now is kind of manipulative, but I'm thinking of in terms of like social media marketing, where you have to actually enter into an exchange relationship with the people who are on the other side of your video, or going to your website, or buying your things that or getting tarot readings. You have to have that relationship. You can't just sort of set it up and go, you're going to want what I have, because otherwise it doesn't work. People go, yeah, no, I don't. And without building that trust relationship, and without sort of that exchange in both directions, the beneficial thing for both people doesn't happen. So again, as I say every week, there is the Kickstarter through BridgetOwens.com or through the Infinite Light page. There's all sorts of, I've been sharing lots of pictures as the tarot deck is coming together. Kickstarter's still going, about a month left. And we are a little over around a third of the way there. So let's go, guys. Any contribution is welcome, but if you contribute, there's the little prize packages, and you can get some cool stuff, including this, along with your tarot deck. If you have any questions about it, let me know. And if you'd like a tarot reading, you can go through BridgetOwens.com. Or the Facebook page will lead you there if you go to the shop area, and I can do email readings. Or if you're in Springfield, just come on down to Alchemist Attic. I will actually be here tomorrow night. I'm not usually on Friday nights, but I will be here tomorrow night doing readings, as well as the rest of the evening tonight. So thank you for watching and all the comments. It's much more fun when I can interact with people. Thanks.